off with an opening that I'm not 100% familiar with. It's possible that we go into I was going to say Queen's Gambit type line, but apparently not. So I'm going to follow up with an opening that I use in defense of the Queen's Gambit. I don't know if this is going to work or not. We'll just try. My opponent proposes a take back. I'm going to decline, I guess. I don't know. Let me see if they said anything in the chat room. No. I'm not certain. I'll leave the chat room open, see if they say anything in here. No, I guess they're going to continue playing. Okay. So it's possible my opponent takes, I take back. I might take with the knight. I don't know. I'm not certain how to play this opening, but that's okay. Look, we don't have to know everything about every position. Like, we just play good chess. We try to make good decisions wherever possible. We'll see what happens. We'll see what develops. So my opponent chose not to grab. I think I'm just going to go ahead and continue developing. My light square bishop is going to run into some issues, though, trying to find ways out. So that's something I need to figure out how to do, is how to get my light square bishop involved. My dark square bishop obviously has direct path here. My opponent can easily block. It's not a problem. If my opponent grabs now, I will take towards the center. Just kind of keep that theme going of taking towards the center. So I'm trying to decide, as you can see, where to drop this bishop, either c5 or b4. With this pawn already on c4, it might be possible to trap my bishop. So if I drop it here, no, I guess not. I guess there's really no trap. I guess I should have been okay. That's all right. Now my opponent's pawn structure is kind of weird, so I'm going to hold off a little bit on castling, just in case my opponent's looking at castle queenside. But then again, they do have this hole already here. Let's continue developing this way, and then we'll push a pawn and stick our light square bishop along that line. I'm just looking for regular developing moves. Just nothing like, no plan right now. Just trying to play such a way that I keep things as balanced as possible. Right, just try not to lose. That's the goal here. Try to keep it drawish as much as we, drawishly possible. Okay, so my opponent does castle kingside. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. Just castle kingside. The only reason I chose not to immediately is because if my opponent starts pushing a kingside attack, I just don't want my king hanging out around here. But now that my opponent's castled, I can castle. This outside attack is not, the threat is not as strong. All right, my opponent's probably going to play in the middle of the board, which it looks like they are. Possibly play on the queen side. We'll see. I'm going to start pushing some queen side here a little bit. I have trapped my light square bishop, so I'm going to have to find a way to get my light square bishop involved. So probably pushing a pawn, rotate my dark square bishop, push another pawn, get my light square bishop out. Yeah. Light square bishop is bad here. Another option, slide my rook over. I can rotate my knight up and around. Which would give me basically a hidey hole to start moving my light square bishop up this way. I'm debating on starting to trade off material. Because my pieces are gummed up, trading off material might be a good thing to kind of open the board up for me a little bit. I still can develop my queen with no problem. If I look at my opponent's plan, this knight is probably looking for space here. And honestly, if the knight drops into you know, the c5 square, I'm okay with that because I do have it covered twice. My work laptop is chirping at me, so I got to keep an eye on that. I'm on my lunch break right now, so technically I don't have to check that, but I like to keep an eye on things. Now that this guy's developed, can I push here? I don't really want to. All right, let's go with the trade-off plan. Let's see if we can trade off. I am giving up a little bit of control of this c5 square, which I just said I was glad I have, but I can always reattack it this way if I need to. Now my opponent could push if they really wanted to, but it just drops a pawn, so probably not. All right, continuing on. I think I would like to push a pawn here to be able to activate my light square bishop at least a little. All right, push a pawn. If my opponent captures, I capture back, and then I've got some room on the light square diagonal. It's possible I push and then my opponent just closes the position. So my opponent has 1, 2, 3 attackers in that pawn. I have 1, 2, 3 defenders in that pawn, so I'm okay. Let's go ahead and trade off. All right, let's go ahead and make a trade. My dark square bishop was okay, but I've got to get my light square bishop out into the game somehow. Now, I don't want to do that because there's 2 attackers there. Let's just do this. And now at least I can get my light square bishop out and put some pressure along this diagonal. Okay, so let's scan the board a little bit. Now the question that I'm going to have to review on this game, and someone smarter than me would probably have a better time of it, but was trading off my dark square bishop a good move or not? Was that dark square bishop a good piece? I don't know. Those are the kind of things that's hard for me to evaluate on first blanch. So my opponent's got their queen developed. I could stick my rook over now. That seems like a good plan. I do have to watch for things like this, the dark square bishop getting involved. His dark square bishop has really opened up. And so maybe me giving up my dark square bishop, maybe that was a bit premature. Maybe because he has a dark square bishop and I don't. Maybe we've gotten to a point where I wish I had mine to be able to counter it. Now I could drop my knight back. I start here, my opponent grabs, I grab. Grab down here. I'm still in time to block. The problem is if I grab here and then my opponent simply, no, because they still drop this. So if I grab here, he would have to slide the rook up. And then I guess I have time to rotate around. Okay, we're gonna go with this plan, and then I have time to rotate around. And actually that worked out okay. So my opponent drops a rook for 2 pieces. Logistically, the experts would say that my opponent is up here. Specifically since he's taken both of my bishops and my opponent still has the bishop pair. So my opponent probably has a slightly better position right now than I do. Giving up 2 pieces for a rook is not a perfectly even trade. I still am up an extra pawn. So I've got a rook and 2 pawns where my opponent has 2 of my pieces. I don't know. I don't know if this is good or bad. We shall see. I don't have a plan of attack from here on out. Want to develop my queen somewhere. I'm not sure where my queen needs to go. If my opponent drops back, I'm going to go ahead and push. In fact, I'm going to pre-move this capture. Because if my opponent drops that bishop back, notice that that's blocked off. So he traps his bishop, and so I'm able to at least get a little bit of material back. So I'm pretty sure my opponent has to capture my knight here. Pretty sure. Which helps me develop my queen for free. So again, this might turn out to be a good thing for me. I'm just scanning my opponent's board, looking at some of the possible threats here. Can the knight rotate around and put additional pressure here? Possibly. Yes, I'm going to go ahead and go with this plan. It's something that I thought about already. I do have to be careful that my knight is obviously undefended, but we get a little material back. And combined with the previous trade, I'm okay with this. Now I do have to watch for this grab with check. Question is there anything that I can do with my knight? This puts immediate pressure on, and that pawn is still defended. But does that help me any? From here, can my knight go anywhere? No, my knight is really restricted on where it can go from here. From here, my knight is defending a little bit. And maybe that's where it needs to go. Maybe my knight just needs to sit here. Or I might even go here and rotate the knight back right here to g7. Does that help at all? I need to control light squares, but I need to control, you know, let's just do this. So this is defended. This is defended. This is not defended. Could go for a queen trade here. No, cannot do that. Why? Because captures with check, the king moves, and I mean the knight moves, and I'm done for. So we can't go for that queen trade. What do I have to worry about here? Captures up. Queen goes somewhere. Do I risk just giving up a pawn? I think I have to risk dropping this pawn. I've really destroyed my kingside safety. If grabs, And then the queen goes somewhere. Now, if the queen were to move, the queen can't move there, the queen can't move there. So there's no threat of checkmate. It's just grabs, grabs, and then the queen still can't get involved. So I'm okay. And then this pawn push becomes a threat. All right, so I am on the defensive right now. My opponent is throwing the kitchen sink at me, and I really have to find a way to find some kind of proactive plan. Right now, I'm just gonna keep defending, keep defending, keep defending. Yeah, my opponent's really looking at busting open this position, but the good news is so am I. So now my opponent has to figure out what to do here. This is defended. I probably will close the board down by pushing this pawn. So now my opponent's looking at something like this, which could be an issue if I'm not careful. Knight on f8 stops the mate. Is that right? Let's get our queen into the game. But now this comes with check, and then this comes with check, but I can move back. I hate these games where I don't know enough about these endgame patterns to really know if I'm safe or not. So this is a possibility. I probably will just grab, well, actually I might grab back with the knight. Maybe. Now that my opponent's queen is moved, I kind of want my rook and my queen along here, so if the queen comes, I can shut it down this way. All right, the question is, do I take with the knight or do I take with the pawn? I might be able to rotate the knight up and over that way if I need to. Everything's defended on my board. Yeah, so then the question is, what do I do with this particular knight? I hate putting my queen in front of my king, but at least we are defending everything. Right? There's no checks, there's no checks, there's no checks, there's no checks. I'm okay. So I have this check here. It doesn't really do anything for me. Not yet, anyway. Excuse me, sorry about that. If my opponent were to slide their queen backwards one square, then that does give me a beautiful fork. But nothing right now. But I'll keep this in mind. This fork is something that I need to keep in mind. Okay, so now things are going to start to get really hairy if I'm not careful. Do I have time for a slow move like this, like a developing move? Is there any way I can dismiss this? I'm okay here. In fact, I could push this pawn. No, because that... yeah, I can push that pawn. Add an extra level of defense here. This knight is only semi defended, so I have to be real careful about my opponent getting something like this in. All right, so now we're in not time troubled, but now both of us have time issues that we need to be concerned about. So I'm going to hover my finger over the confirm button, so that way I don't have too much of a delay on my I was just going to say I have a threat, but my opponent found it. Okay, so now let's start pushing for something. Now let's start pushing for something. Now that we've kind of thwarted all my opponent's threats, let's start pushing for something. I was hoping to be able to grab this pawn with check and then pick up the bishop, but we'll see. This knight has to move first. But we'll start along something like these lines. I do have to be careful that this rook is undefended. Maybe I'll slide my... Actually, maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll slide my king over here. There's two attackers on this pawn, and I only have one defender on it. So maybe I'll slide my... okay, that helps. Because we got this with check. And now what? Opponent has this. This with check. And I can always come right back if I have to. All right, let's come right back. I'm just looking for any knight forks here real quick. So I'm trying to play fast here. I'm up material. I just need to find a way to do something with it. It's probably going to start walking my king, maybe. I'm not sure. All right. I've really got to keep an eye on the time here. Oh, right. Why can't I capture? Oh, because it's a double check. Okay. Oh no, I gave up this. No, it's okay. I can still hide. That is not a double check. Force the queens off. Let's just go here. Oh, whoops, I just dropped a rook. Ha! I just dropped a rook and my opponent didn't see it, thank goodness. Cancel. Let's do this. I hate these end games, guys. When we're scrambling, I hate time scrambles. Absolutely hate them. GG, well played to my opponent. I was in a winning position there. Just had to convert it, and with the queens on the board, those time scrambles are damn near impossible. I dropped a rook back here, right here. This rook is not defended, so my opponent can easily just grab. Completely made a mistake there. Time scrambles, I hate them. Absolutely hate them. That's why I play with an increment. So without the increment, I would have lost this game a long time ago, even though I was in a winning position, because I take too long. But that's okay. Taking long made sure that I did not get into too many situations. Let's take a quick analysis of this game. I'm going to turn on the analysis book just to see. Yeah, I should have just grabbed that pawn. I liked this pawn structure, and I didn't want to give it up by busting it open. Yeah, the engine says giving up the dark square bishop was not a great move. So, oh well. Wow, it says white has a huge advantage here. I guess because I completely destroy my king side. Yeah, I mean, destroying your king safety while your opponent has both bishops and the queen, it is a bit imprecise, right? That's a risk that you really have to watch out for. So let me quickly scan through. Yeah, I guess I got lucky there that my opponent chose the path that he did. That's okay. And then, yeah, you can see the turnaround here. So after this series of events, we were back to somewhat even. I'm down a little bit. Like I said, the evaluation is actually a lot closer than I expected it to be. If my opponent had grabbed with the pawn, the evaluation would have been way different. But, you know, they chose to... Luckily, I got lucky that they chose to grab the way they did. And then I made a mistake by grabbing with the knight and allowing that pin. But then this series here, so you could see this, unfortunately, my opponent drops a whole piece here. Well, not a whole piece, but... And from here on out, my king safety was in question. I mean, this was tough for me, even though I'm up in the evaluation, right? This was tough for me. surprised that the engine really likes bringing the knight all the way around, because I guess there's really no way for the queen to get involved, right? There's nothing here, nothing here, nothing here, nothing. So there's really no way for the queen to get involved. Okay. So I played this okay, but not great. You could see a lot of the times where I did not choose the engine's top move. Now, like, if we look at the evaluation here, it's not always about just the top move, right? These two evaluations are so similar that for a human at my level, like, this is a totally fine choice. Yeah, look how identical these two are. So pick one of these two, and you're fine. Whereas there's a jump from the top two to the next two. There's a jump there. So I played it okay. Yeah, pushing the F pawn was the way to go here, and I'm glad I was able to get that. Oof, the engine hates that. Hates that. Oh, I see, because we allow this. But realistically, like, I wanted to move my rook back here anyway, so that I could get my queen here defending and have my king helping defend the rook. But engine's not happy with that one. Luckily, my opponent decided to go this way. Okay, so and here, if we look at F capture versus knight capture, when we look at the evaluation, they're very similar again. So doing anything other than that capture maybe is not great, but that capture, they're so similar that I'm happy with either one. You know, I struggled for a little bit to try to find the best move. Yeah, I played it okay. I sussed out all my opponent's threats. Man, this one here really had me worried, bringing that knight or that rook around. Pushing the pawn, again, pushing the F pawn, the forget about it pawn. Now, on the black side of the board, sometimes that F pawn is not nearly as deadly as pushing the F pawn on the white side of the board. It has something to do with basically the that diagonal, right? I'm not exactly sure, but for some reason it seems that pushing the F pawn from black side of the board is a little less controversial than pushing the F pawn from the white side of the board. Yeah, this slow move of bringing the rook over, probably not the world's greatest. Grab with check, and then I didn't know what to do from here, to be honest with you. Grab the other pawn. Yep, so the engine's okay with these pawn grabs. Sometimes are poison. You want to get them, right? You want to get that extra pawn, because one pawn may not make the difference between winning or losing. 2 pawns, yes. 3 pawns, for sure. But that one pawn, you're like, well, I'll just grab it. Sometimes doing so can completely lose you the game, though. So don't be greedy. Don't go pawn grabbing just for the sake of pawn grabbing. This one was important because it weakened this whole section, right? And I felt good about that. Coming with check, putting the onus on my opponent to make plays. This one I was really nervous about, and I'm glad it worked out, because again, time management was an issue here. I'm up now. If we look at forget the board position, if we look at 2 rooks and a knight versus a rook, a knight, and a bishop. So I'm up a full exchange plus 3 pawns. So an exchange plus 3 pawns at this point in time. That's a winning board position. Now it's just time to convert, and we were both running really low on time. My opponent more so than me, but a lot of that was, if you look at here, forcing my opponent to figure out what to do next. You know, my opponent taking the time to figure out where to go. All right, and then from here, yeah, my opponent driving my knight away. Glad I found this knight to e4. That was always in my back pocket, and so I'm glad I didn't. I mean, it took me I mean, look at my clock here. Oof. I have 48 seconds and I burned 30 of them right here on this one move. But it was the right thing. It came out to be the right thing to do, and my opponent continually to push. Wow. Yeah, and because of time scramble, here's where things get oopsie. I see. My opponent can force basically a draw because my king cannot leave the defense of my queen, and my opponent can just keep throwing checks at me. Okay, so that's why. And my opponent could have forced the draw here, and I'm glad that it didn't work out that way. Yeah, I was worried about this check, but I didn't see anything come from it. Yeah, it looks like my opponent can... Oh, no, they can really start gobbling stuff up. Yeah, and then a forced checkmate. Okay, so yeah, all right, interesting. I'll have to analyze that one more because I don't see it exactly. Luckily, my opponent again in time trouble. This was a double check, so I could not capture just the knight. I was still in check from the queen. Unfortunately, my opponent just in time trouble, just trying to scramble to make a move, and only 10 seconds left on the board. Used 5 seconds to find this move, and unfortunately just dropped a piece. I tried for the queen trade. Let's see, the queen trade. Yeah, the queen trade is most definitely the most is the piece that I wanted to get. Yeah, I don't know about that. And then here, I just whoopsie-doops. Yeah, so I'm glad my opponent missed that. That was lucky on my part. Time scramble. This is what happens in time scramble, though. This is why I hate time scrambles, because you fall away from making good decisions and you miss things. And so I really shouldn't be analyzing a time scramble. Right? I'm happy that I spotted that this was a rook drop at the time. Like, I'm happy that I spotted it, but I spotted it a second later than I needed to. Yeah, and then just bringing it back. Okay. Yeah, so this is a very slow move here. This pawn push, very slow move. Absolutely does nothing. But the idea was I needed some time back on my clock. So I needed to make moves that give me that I can, safe moves that I can make quickly to try to get some time back. And luckily these were safe enough that I didn't really get in any trouble just popping these safe moves. Then yeah, this pawn push by my opponent was just a mistake. I mean, there's really nothing they can do except they gave up a pawn with check, and yeah, the only reason I retreated, again, I was looking for safe moves to get some time back on my clock, safe moves that I can make, and then my opponent ran out of time. But the goal here was simply yeah, force a queen trade. Or if my opponent decides to skip the queen trade, then, you know, I just crush. But forcing a queen trade would really simplify things going into an endgame. Connect these two pawns. I've got these two pawns connected so they can shut down my opponent's pawn. I've got 2 rooks to 1 rook. Let's say I play the best move for my opponent. Let me turn the engine off for a second. Yeah, and then... Yeah, and at this point in time, like... Oh no, I just bring the rook back. Slide the rook under. Get the king involved. Yeah, whatever my opponent does. If he goes this way, I grab the pawn with check. If he goes this way, that's fine. I'm defending. What I really want to make sure I do is I defend these in-between squares. So depending on which way my opponent goes, this way I would probably go up. Really defend this square. So my opponent can't get his king to attack the back of this pawn chain. Now give him the best move, and then I grab this, so there's no risk anymore. What I do? Probably either stick the rook behind the passed pawn or stick it in front of the passed pawn. Let's stick it behind the passed pawn. And then now I can just drive. Just make sure my opponent doesn't end up, yeah, as soon as he goes past it, that's a free queen. The only thing is to watch out for is make sure you don't end up in a situation where your opponent can stalemate. So, right, opponent can stalemate. So I want to make sure my opponent has access to one of these two squares so that they can get out from stalemate. If I were to push something like this, then the only legal moves my opponent has are these two. So I want to make sure I don't accidentally take those away by, oops. Oh no, I screwed up. Oh well. Something like this, something like this, something like this. Now, let's say if I were to do something like this. I've taken away, right, the king takes away these three squares. I've taken away one of the squares from my opponent. And then he pushes like this. If I were to do something like that, now my opponent has no legal moves, is not in check, right? My opponent, the only square they could have gone to was this one. They can't anymore. They're not in check. That's a stalemate. And we go into a draw. I will go from a guaranteed victory to a draw. A draw is not a bad thing, but giving up a victory is a bad thing. So that's all. You have to be careful on things like that. In this particular case, just keep the rook behind that passed pawn and then continue to drive. If my opponent were to do something like this, that's fine. Notice this is still available to my opponent, so I'm going to just drive up. And now this is available to my opponent. Once my opponent is outside of that, boom. Now we got our queen, and between these two, that's an easy victory. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. My opponent asked for a take back early on in this game, so I'm assuming that they made a mistake in their opening and played something they didn't want to. I don't know the English opening. I do know that the English opening is very popular right now. Magnus Carlsen, the current world champion, has kind of popularized, revitalized. I don't know. I don't know much about the English opening, but I know that a lot of people are playing it because Magnus played it a lot. So it's definitely something worth learning. It can quickly transposition into the Queen's Gambit Declined. So if I see one of these two pawns pushing, I go with my standard Queen's Gambit Declined board position. This is where, yeah, I think my opponent asked for a take back right here. I'm wondering if they meant to push something else. Okay, so it's possible my opponent meant to play this and instead grabbed this. That's possible. Because looking at the most common next moves, knight f3 is up there as a common move. Knight c3 is way more common though. So yeah, I don't know what this move is. Very uncommon move, but like I said, my opponent asked for a take back right there, so it's possible they made a mistake, but I'm not certain. And like I said, I went for this setup is what I use for the Queen's Gambit Declined. It seems to work for me. It does block in your light square bishop, and so I have to be really conscious of finding a way to get my light square bishop out, and I don't have a good way to do it. And in this particular game, I never found a way to do that. Yeah, I probably should have brought my light square bishop here first, and then rotated my knight, something like that. Probably would have been better. Yeah, we go very quickly into a brand new game. Bishop e7 is the most common. Only idiots like me play bishop c4. I mean c5, excuse me. Yeah, all right, well this is it. That's it. That's the whole game, guys. Really appreciate you guys sticking with me. There's a few lessons we can learn from this. So this particular dark square, my opponent has weakened it. Maybe getting rid of my dark square bishop, not a good idea. If that dark square is, if there's already a weakness right here, I probably want to keep my dark square bishop on the board to help exploit that. If I play Queen's Gambit declined, I need to find better ways to get my light square bishop involved. And I should. Not a lot of people play the Queen's Gambit declined. From at least at my rating level, my opponents, I haven't got a lot of experience playing the Queen's Gambit decline from the black side. Not enough, not as much as I want. I want more experience doing it. And I've got to go back and restudy and figure out what people do with their light square bishops, because I just don't know. You know, maybe from this position, maybe this is better, because then I can get my light square bishop that way. You know, maybe just changing the order that I move my pawns. I don't know. I'll have to go back and expect. So, things that I want to learn. What to do with my light square bishop, because part of my opening was driven by the fact that I needed to find a way to get it involved in the game, and I'm not happy with how I did it. Number two is react to the game at hand, not what you have in your mind, but what's actually happening. And in this case, the dark squares were weakened, so I should keep my dark square bishop. You know? Maybe, I don't know. I'm guessing, right? Alrighty, guys. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you next time. Y'all have a great day.